Hi and welcome to Oxygen Projects. In this video I'd like to just run through an example site, one of many we've done, which kind of highlights, illustrates how we do what we do. Give you some ideas of how the process works, the results that can be achieved, and how we're sort of contributing to the social housing shortage, the affordable housing shortage that we've got in this country. It's something that definitely needs addressing, and with working together, this is how we want to tackle it across the UK. This example site just shows how we can do it. So there's a picture at the top of this slide there. That is the site that we're going to be talking about. It's in Nottingham, the side of an ex-local authority estate, actually. So arguably not the greatest of areas for residential private development, but it's certainly ideal for what we're doing, and we certainly put it together and it worked really well. I want to just talk over again the three pillars of what we do. So there's three main aspects that we bring together with our strategy. The first one is the prospect, so our client. So we start with the end in mind. We go out, we find our clients, and we find out exactly what they want. And that is, for me, the best form of any business. So then we go out and find the land, and touching back on the last slide again, the kind of land we're looking at will largely be overlooked by private developers because they're perhaps perceived as not being profitable or not being very desirable. But it depends who your prospect is, it depends who your end user is. And of course we've identified our prospect and the kind of land they're after in the kind of areas. We know exactly what we're looking for, and we go out and get it. And then finally is the contractor. So it's all well and good having the land, but we will need to get it built. So again, we'll go and address this with contractors that have worked with their clients before, or similarly clients, or we get them to the stage where they can work for our clients. And here's an overview of the actual site. We got 17 bungalows on this site, over 55 bungalows. It's just over half of an acre. So it's an old pub site, it's not very big. There's many of these sites in your neighbourhood, I absolutely guarantee that. Let's just take a little bit more of a look at it. And we start with the prospect again. So going back to this, we've reached out to housing associations in our area, and we've got an established relationship with them through conversations that we will be having, through emails and meetings. And what we're really doing is establishing their core needs. So we're asking what our client wants, and they will express what their core needs are and any specific needs. In this case, they told us, we went on to find out that they had specific needs, which is the over 55s bungalows in this case. And then gave us clear instructions of the kind of things they would like, the size of the units, and we were also able to ascertain the rates. And when you know exactly what your client wants and exactly what your client can pay, that is a really powerful set of information to have, because it aids with negotiation. You know exactly what you can purchase these things for, exactly what you can build on it, exactly what you're going to get paid to build it, and you can work very early on your profit margins. Whereas with conventional development, you are very reliant on the market. If the market takes a tumble, or if there's any a similar development next door or very close by, it could affect sales, for example. So there are elements out of your control. But when we know all of this information and we get this signed in the very early stages and agreed, we know we've got our profit locked in, providing we can get the scheme on that we want, which is all where the land comes into it. So we're looking for a certain type and size of land, where we know we can get the figures to work and we can get a certain amount of properties on there. In this particular case, as an example of how we will teach you how to set up an ecosystem of leads, so you're getting leads brought to you by all sorts of sources, some you perhaps wouldn't have considered before. This one came from a structural engineer that we had a relationship with. It was in the hands of a receiver, so the previous developer had actually gone into liquidation, and the structural engineer was working for the previous developer. So he said, look, we've got this site we've been working on, it's come to nothing, and in fact there's work we've done and not been paid for. So he was looking at it to resurrect it, to continue working on the site and get fees from it. We spoke to the receivers and they told us what had happened, and we could look on the planning portal for it, that the previous scheme that had been put together was very inappropriate really for this area. It was 3-4 bed houses, needing to get a high price tag for the sales to make any margins, but the nature of the area, it's quite a low value area, low demographic area, and like I say, on the edge of a previous social housing estate. So sales probably wouldn't have been flying off the shelf, to be perfectly honest, and the banks knew that, and other developers knew that. So he couldn't lend, he couldn't borrow any money on the scheme, and he couldn't sell it to anyone else with that scheme. But we looked at it from a different point of view, because we know what our client wants, and we're looking at it purely through those eyes. And when we'd established how much we could get, we also established that our scheme, we would be paid more than the open market value, because there was a specific requirement in this case. So we went on to legally secure the site subject to planning with the receivers, and then we went on to draw up our own scheme for the 17 bungalows, which we knew is exactly what our prospect, our client now needs, and therefore it was pre-sold. So it was contractually sold before we started to put any scheme and spend any money together. So as we said, we then need a contractor, and for us, we contacted a contractor that we knew had worked for our client before, and we found that out through the channels that we can show you. You know, the obvious ones will be Google, but there's ways to find these things out. We showed them a scheme, an indicative scheme, and they gave us first a budget price, but latterly a fixed price as they did their due diligence. And it was for them to do that due diligence on ground reports and things like that, to make sure they were able and comfortable to give us a fixed price. So we then agreed a slightly higher figure for the build with our client, because they'd already told us what they could pay for it. And we were able to make an arrangement fee in the middle for setting that up. It didn't go out to tender, so we went to the contractor and we were able to say, if you can get your price right, you can definitely have this contract. And we simply drew up the contracts between the both parties, so between our client and the contractor, and arranged for it to be signed, and from then our part was done. So this site in particular, just a little bit more about it. This is how it looked when we took it on. As I said, it's an old pub site, but it had already been demolished, and it already got permission for residential development, as I said. So a lot of the big question marks had been taken away from a pub site, and because the previous developer had got quite a way down the line with things, he'd actually got ground investigation reports and other really key and important surveys, traffic surveys and things like that. So it was a lot easier and quicker to compile a planning application, and to be honest, a lot cheaper. As I mentioned before, it's a less desirable area, and it did have limited uses, and that was the problem, I guess. So this was during the build. We've got a contract, as I said, set up directly with the builder, the building contractor, and the client. And from the point of getting planning permission, that's when it's automatically sold. We don't have any involvement in that build period. So we've been paid on grant of permission, and we get paid from both the client and the contractor at that point. So we don't have to wait for the build. We don't take the risks of being involved in a build contract or funding it. And we don't have to wait for any sales period at the end to get our money, because on a normal development, you have to sell units to pay back the bank, and then maybe private investors if you've used investment. And then the last part, the last few sales, is your profit. So as I said, if prices have taken a tumble, if there's been delays, extra finance costs, it all comes off the end profit. But this isn't in the equation for us, because we've been paid on completion of the land sale, and way before any build happens. And to reiterate what I said before, because we didn't put this out to tender, we put it to one identified contractor, and we got arrangement fees from them for arranging the contract with our client. And that's me afterwards, and those are the finished units. So really compact, tidy units. They're very small, 45 to 50 square metre one-bed units, and ideal for a specific need. And in this area there was very much a need for over 55s housing, which is quite common in the private sector, but not so much in the public sector. So we were very glad to have a happy client, and we've gone on to do many more schemes with these guys. Great project for the contractor, and again they've gone on to do many schemes, and a healthy profit for us, of course. So a really good scheme all round, and just to give you a little illustration of what we do. So again, very low risk. We spent very little on this scheme because it was all done subject to planning. The large amount of surveys were already done. The housing association involved in this actually paid for the architect's fees to put our scheme of bungalows together. So we had a guaranteed sale, and actually when you worked it all out, the values of these, so that the money that was paid for the build and the land, the whole project value was actually more than open market sales would have been. And great profit and land uplift from us, from arrangement fees and land uplift. So thanks for looking. Hopefully that's been useful. I do look forward to speaking to you soon. If you'd like to get in touch, please click one of the links, and we'd love to have a chat.